The mountains looked calm from far away, but everyone who had worked in them knew that calm was a lie. The air was thin, cold, and sharp enough to burn the lungs. Rocks rose like broken teeth, cutting the land into narrow paths where sound carried too far and escape came too slow. In this place, an elite team moved carefully, step by step, boots pressing into dust that had seen too much blood already. They had trained for years for moments like this. Long nights, endless drills, quiet lessons learned the hard way. Each man carried the weight of skill, discipline, and trust in the one beside him. This mission was meant to be quick and clean, in and out before the enemy even knew they were there. Intelligence had said the area was lightly guarded. Intelligence was wrong. The first sign came as a sound that did not belong. A crack in the distance, sharp, then another. The lead man froze, raising his fist. The team dropped low, hearts already racing. In the mountains, sound played tricks. A single noise could mean nothing or everything. They waited, counting breaths, eyes scanning ridges and shadows. Then the hills answered. Gunfire erupted from above, echoing and multiplying until it felt like the mountains themselves were firing. Dirt exploded around them. Stone shattered. One man went down hard, rolling behind cover with a shout that cut short. Training took over. They returned fire, controlled and steady, but the angles were bad. The enemy had the high ground. Always the worst place to fight from below dot. Their radio crackled as the team leader tried to reach command. Static answered back. The signal was weak, broken by rock and distance. He tried again. Nothing. The team pulled tighter together, dragging the injured man into a shallow dip behind a boulder. Blood soaked into the dust, dark and fast. A medic worked with shaking hands, pressing cloth, and murmuring words meant to calm, though no one was calm. Minutes stretched into something heavier. Ammo counts were checked. Not enough. Never enough. The enemy fire did not stop. It came in bursts, patient, confident. Whoever was above them knew time was on their side. The team leader finally got a broken signal through. His voice stayed steady as he gave their position and situation. Ambushed, multiple, enemy positions, casualties, low ammunition. He asked for immediate air support. The reply came late and thin. Weather was moving in. Visibility was dropping fast. Aircraft were tied up elsewhere. Support would be delayed. Delayed was a word no one wanted to hear. The leader looked at his men. Faces streaked with dust and sweat. Eyes sharp but tired. These were not men who panicked easily. Yet even now, something unspoken passed between them. They understood the truth without saying it out loud. If help did not come soon, they would not make it out. They tried to move under cover of smoke, but the terrain betrayed them. Every step exposed them to fire from above. Another man took a hit, not fatal, but enough to slow them down. Slower meant dead. The enemy pressed harder, tightening the circle dot. As the sun dipped lower, shadows grew longer and more dangerous. Cold crept in with the evening wind. Radios failed again. Batteries drained. The world seemed to shrink to the sound of breathing, the sting of dust in eyes, the constant knowledge that they were running out of time. The team leader sent another message. Shorter this time. Coordinates, status, a final request. His voice did not shake, but his grip on the radio was tight enough to turn his knuckles white. And silence not far away from the mountains. The day was ending at a forward airbase carved into flat, empty land. The sky that was wide and dull, painted in fading orange and gray. Most of the base was settling down for the night. Engines were quiet. Offices closed. Only a few lights stayed on, humming softly against the dark. Inside one of the long buildings, a janitor pushed a cart down the hallway. The wheels squeaked with every turn. He moved slowly, not from laziness, but from habit. Years had taught him to notice everything around him. The scuff marks on the floor, the smell of oil and metal in the air, the distant sound of aircraft that never truly left his mind. He was a single father. Every decision he made started and ended with that truth. Long ago, life had taken him in a direction he had not planned. Responsibilities came before dreams. Stability mattered more than titles. This job paid steady and kept him close to home. That was enough. Most people walked past him without a second glance. To them, he was just part of the background. Someone who cleaned up after others and stayed quiet. Few knew much about him. He preferred it that way. As he emptied a trash bin near a briefing room, raised voices drifted through the partially open door. He did not mean to listen, but certain words caught his attention. Coordinates, contact lost, trapped, weather closing in. He paused. Hand still on the cart handle, a large map was spread across the table inside. Officers stood around it, tension heavy in their posture. One voice spoke about terrain, another about risk. Someone mentioned that the team on the ground was elite, among the best. Yet the word extraction hung in the air like a question with no answer. The janitor's jaw tightened. He had heard this tone before, years ago. It was the sound people made when options were running out. He moved on, but the words followed him down the hall. His mind filled the gaps without effort. Mountains, ambush, high ground, low ammo. He knew exactly how that felt. The memories were old but sharp, tucked away where he kept things he did not talk about. Outside, the wind picked up, a warning of the storm rolling in. He stepped out briefly, looking toward the runway where aircraft sat dark and still. One in particular stood apart, its shape unmistakable even in low light. He stopped again, longer this time. Inside his chest, something stirred. Not excitement, not pride, responsibility. He thought of the team in the mountains. Men who had families too. Men who trusted that someone, somewhere, was doing everything possible to bring them home. He thought of his own child, waiting for him each night, believing without question that he would always come back. He returned to his work, but his hands moved slower now. His thoughts were no longer in the hallway. They were far away, high among ridges and shadows, where time was slipping through tired fingers. Back in the mountains, night fell fully. The temperature dropped fast. The injured man shivered despite the blanket pulled over him. The medic whispered encouragement, though his supplies were nearly gone. The team leader checked his watch, knowing it no longer mattered. Enemy fire slowed, not because they were leaving, but because they were waiting. Waiting for darkness to finish what daylight had started. The leader gathered his men close. His voice was low, calm, steady. He spoke about movement plans, about watching sectors, about staying alert. He did not speak about fear or endings. He did not need to. Every man there understood the risk they had accepted the moment they stepped onto that mountain above them. Clouds rolled in, hiding the stars at the airbase. The janitor finished his shift later than usual. He stood for a moment before clocking out, staring at the time card in his hand. He knew that once he left, the night would move on without him. Decisions would be made by others. Outcomes would be written. He set the card down. Somewhere, a radio sat silent in the cold. Somewhere, hope was thinning. And somewhere between duty and doubt, a quiet man stood at the edge of a choice he never expected to face again far from the mountains. The base seemed quiet, but quiet was only a thin layer. Beneath it, tension lived like a hidden current. Officers whispered, fingers tapping on maps and keyboards, each waiting for news that did not come. The sun had set hours ago, and the wind carried the smell of cold metal and dust. The runway lights glimmered faintly, casting long shadows across the empty tarmac dot inside one of the maintenance buildings. A janitor pushed his cart slowly, taking the long route to avoid disrupting anyone. He moved in rhythm with the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above, listening to the distant sound of engines and the low chatter from the briefing room. Most people never noticed him. That was how he liked it. The job was simple, quiet, and steady. It allowed him to be near his child, who depended on him more than anything else. But tonight, nothing felt simple. The words he overheard earlier kept repeating in his mind: trapped, ambushed, low ammo, high ground. The janitor had been a pilot once, long ago. He had flown missions, faced danger, and carried people home. Life had pulled him away from that world, but the memory of flying, of control, of responsibility, was still vivid. It was a part of him that could not be erased. He paused outside the briefing room, pretending to adjust his cart. Inside, officers hunched over a large map, speaking in clipped tones. They were discussing auctions, but every choice sounded like a gamble. One officer shook his head. Visibility is dropping. We can't get aircraft in until morning. The janitor's hands tightened on the cart handle. His mind raced, running calculations almost instinctively. He knew the terrain in the mountains, the challenges of reaching a team pinned down by the enemy, and the limitations of the aircraft at the base. He had flown in worse conditions, done the impossible before. The thought of waiting until morning made his stomach twist. He moved along the hallway, listening but keeping his face calm. Most people would never guess that he had experience that could change everything. The janitor had learned to keep silent, to blend in. But tonight, silence felt wrong. Meanwhile, back in the mountains, the trapped team faced another long, cold night. The wind whipped across the ridges, carrying the scent of dust and blood. The injured man shivered, wrapped in a blanket that did little against the cold. The medic worked tirelessly, checking wounds, replacing bandages, giving water where he could. Every movement was careful, deliberate. One wrong step could attract fire, and there was nowhere safe to hide. The team leader crouched with his back against a rock, eyes scanning the shadows for movement. He spoke quietly, not to scare the others, but to keep them alert. His words were clear, steady. They discussed their limited options: move, wait, or fight through. All choices were dangerous. He felt the weight of each decision pressing down, knowing that every second counted. High above, clouds blocked the stars, leaving only a faint glow from the moon. The night seemed endless, stretching time into a haze. Every sound became louder, sharper. A branch snapping could mean an enemy. A falling rock could signal danger. The team moved like ghosts, careful with every step. But even their careful movements could not erase the risk dot at the base. The janitor finished emptying a hallway trash bin and leaned against the wall for a moment. He allowed himself a breath and thought about the team. Men he did not know, fighting for their lives, depending on help that might never come. He could almost feel their exhaustion, their fear, and their determination. It was familiar, more familiar than he wanted to admit. The part of him that had flown missions before stirred, an old instinct coming alive. He looked out toward the runway. The aircraft sat silent, waiting. Its engines cold, its presence almost unnoticed. Most people saw it as a tool, a machine. He saw it as a lifeline. He knew what it could do, how it could move, and how precise it could be in skilled hands. His heart tightened. He had the skill, the knowledge, the experience, and for the first time in years, he felt a pull he could not ignore. Walking back into the hall, he made his way to a small office near the control room. Officers were checking radios, making notes, reviewing maps. He stopped just outside the door, pretending to clean a window. He listened carefully. The discussion was tense, filled with uncertainty. One officer muttered about rules, about protocol, about risk. Another spoke of lives at stake. The janitor's mind raced. Rules were guidelines, he thought. Lives were immediate, urgent. He weighed the danger against the chance to save them. He had made calculations like this before, in worse conditions, under pressure that would have broken most men. He knew he had to act. Not for recognition, not for pride, but because it was the right thing to do. Every moment he delayed could mean the difference between life and death for the team on the mountain. He considered how to approach command, how to offer a solution without overstepping, without causing conflict. He was careful, patient, but resolute. His determination grew stronger with each passing minute. Back in the mountains, the team kept moving slowly, inching toward a ridge that might provide cover. The injured man struggled to keep up, supported by two teammates. The leader's eyes never left the horizon, always watching for danger. Every movement was strategic, every decision life or death. They had trained for situations like this, but training could only carry them so far. The reality of survival was raw, unrelenting. The wind howled, carrying debris and dust that stung eyes and lungs. The team leader called for a brief pause, just enough to catch breath and reassess. The medic checked the injured man again, giving quiet reassurance that words alone could not deliver. The night was long, and hope was thinning, but they pressed on, step by step, refusing to give in to despair. At the base, the janitor made a decision. He would not wait for someone else to act. He would offer himself, his experience, his skill. He would take responsibility, even if it meant risking everything. The thought of his child, waiting for him at home, sharpened his resolve. This was not about glory. It was about people, about lives that depended on action, not hesitation. He approached the office, clearing his throat to announce his presence. The officers looked up, surprised to see him standing there, a janitor in a quiet uniform. He spoke with calm confidence, outlining a plan based on his knowledge of the aircraft and the terrain. He did not boast, did not exaggerate. He presented facts, calculations, and options. He made it clear that he was volunteering, not demanding, and that he understood the risks. The room was silent for a long moment. Commanders exchanged looks, weighing the unusual proposal. Rules and protocol battled with desperation and logic. Finally, the head officer leaned back, considering the man before him. The janitor's eyes were steady, focused. There was no hesitation, no ego, only a quiet certainty that he could make a difference. Back in the mountains, the team pressed on. Their muscles ached, their eyes burned, and fear lingered in every shadow. But they kept moving, trusting in each other, holding on to the belief that someone somewhere was working to bring them home. They did not know who, they did not know how, but that thought kept them alive. The janitor returned to his cart for a moment, gathering his courage. He knew the next step was the most important. He would have to climb into the cockpit, start the engines, and fly into conditions that were dangerous and unpredictable. He thought of his child again, imagining the relief on their face if he succeeded. He imagined the team on the mountain, moving safely because of him. It was a weight and a motivation, all at once. The night deepened. Clouds thickened over the mountains, hiding the terrain, masking dangers, and slowing time. The team on the ground huddled together, waiting, moving carefully, hoping against hope. Every heartbeat felt loud in the silence. Every shadow seemed alive with threat. They were experts, trained, disciplined, but human. Fatigue, fear, and pain were constant companions. At the base, the janitor stepped toward the aircraft. He ran his hands over the cold metal, feeling the familiar contours, the instruments, the controls. Memories came back, sharp and vivid. He remembered the feel of the sky, the roar of engines, the responsibility of carrying lives in his hands. He allowed himself a breath, steadying his nerves, focusing on what had to be done. He climbed into the cockpit, securing himself, checking instruments, running through procedures that had become second nature. The engines roared to life, shaking the hangar and echoing across the tarmac. He felt the power beneath him, the potential to make a difference, to bring people home. Far away, the mountains waited. Darkness pressed down. The team moved, uncertain if help would come, holding on to each other and the fragile thread of hope that still existed. They did not know the janitor had begun his journey, but instinct told them that survival demanded more than just waiting. It demanded courage, persistence, and faith. And somewhere between the base and the mountains, a man who had been overlooked and underestimated was about to change everything. Quiet, unassuming, but determined, he prepared to bring light into the darkness, to cut through fear with skill and courage, and to give hope where it had almost been lost. The air in the cockpit smelled of oil, metal, and old leather, but to the man it smelled like home. Every lever, every gauge, every switch felt familiar. His fingers traced the edges as he ran through checklists in his mind. Years had passed since he last flew a combat mission, but muscle memory did not forget. It was there, deep and precise, waiting for the moment it would be needed again. Outside, the night pressed down hard. Clouds moved quickly, hiding the moon and stars. The wind blew over the base, rattling hangar doors and carrying the low hum of distant machinery. The runway lights glimmered faintly, giving a sense of distance that could deceive anyone who did not know the terrain. The pilot checked his instruments again, adjusting for wind speed, temperature, and visibility. Everything needed to be precise. Lives depended on it. The team in the mountains had paused for a brief rest, their breathing shallow and rapid. Every second stretched into eternity. The injured man leaned on his teammates, trying to ignore the pain and cold that gnawed at him. The medic whispered encouragement, but words felt fragile against the reality of their situation. They were pinned, trapped, and aware that the world beyond the ridge seemed silent. Indifferent, the pilot took a deep breath, remembering the protocols, the training, and the countless missions that had built his confidence. But this was different. He was no longer part of the official chain of command. He was a volunteer in a situation that was against all rules and regulations. That did not matter. Action was required, and hesitation could cost lives. He contacted command once more, keeping his voice steady and calm. Permission was slow, hesitant, and full of questions. Rules, risk, protocol, everything the officers cited was valid. Yet when he laid out the situation with precision and clarity, explaining the experience and knowledge he brought, the head officer finally nodded. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough. Approval came, conditional and cautious. He had his window, and he could not waste a second. The engines roared as he taxied toward the runway, the vibration under him reminding him of past flights. He felt a mixture of fear and clarity. Fear, because this was dangerous, beyond any routine mission. Clarity, because he knew he could do it. Every skill, every calculation, every instinct pointed him forward. There was no time for doubt. Back in the mountains, the team moved again, careful and methodical. Every sound was a warning, every shadow a potential threat. The leader communicated silently, using hand signals and gestures. Trust in each other was absolute. Their training carried them, but human endurance had limits. Cold, exhaustion, and the stress of constant danger pushed them to the edge. They moved with determination, because surrender was not an option. The pilot climbed into the air, engines screaming to life against the night sky. He adjusted altitude, angle, and speed, keeping the aircraft steady despite wind and turbulence. The mountain range below was treacherous, with hidden ridges and sudden drops. He knew them as he knew his own hands, but even familiarity could not remove danger. One wrong calculation could mean disaster. That he thought of the men on the ridge. Unknown to him, they struggled to keep moving, each step weighted with pain and fatigue. The thought of helping them gave him focus. His hands moved smoothly over controls, instincts taking over. Calculations ran in his mind for altitude, speed, and trajectory. Every second mattered. Every choice could save or end lives. Communication with the ground was minimal. Visibility was near zero at times. Yet he pressed forward. Every pass, every maneuver was deliberate. He engaged targets precisely, using the aircraft's capabilities to suppress enemy positions and create openings for the team. The roar of engines and gunfire became a rhythm, a song of survival. It was terrifying, but it was also life. On the ridge, the team finally heard it. A sound that cut through fear like a blade. At first, disbelief. Then recognition. The aircraft screaming over the mountains, precise, relentless, and controlled. Eyes widened. Muscles tensed. Hope, fragile and glowing, returned. They moved, taking advantage of the moment to shift, crawl, and run toward safer ground. The injured man was carried when necessary, lowered carefully over rocks and ridges. Every move was coordinated, every gesture calculated. The team followed instinct and training, synchronized with the support that had arrived just when it was needed most. Every second felt precious, every step a victory against the darkness pressing in. The pilot made multiple passes, each more difficult than the last. Clouds thickened, wind intensified, and the mountain terrain challenged every calculation. Yet he did not waver. Focus and responsibility drove him. This was no longer a mission or a job. This was a duty, pure and simple. The lives below depended entirely on him, and he could not fail. The team moved steadily, climbing, crawling, and running through dangerous terrain. Each pass by the aircraft suppressed enemy fire, providing brief windows of safety. Their trust in each other, in the unseen pilot above, and in their own training kept them alive. Fear was ever present, but courage drove them forward. Human will is strongest when survival is paired with hope. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The pilot calculated every angle, adjusting constantly, aware of the dangers that surrounded him. He pushed the aircraft to limits he had not faced in years, relying on instinct, experience, and precision. Each decision was life or death. Each maneuver could make the difference between survival and tragedy. Yet he remained calm, steady, and determined. The mountains shifted beneath the team, rocks and shadows hiding threats. The leader guided each step, knowing they had the support of someone above, someone experienced, someone who understood both machines and humans. Their faith in that unseen presence gave them strength. Every movement carried them closer to survival. The pilot executed a final pass, clearing the last stronghold of enemy fire. The team seized the opportunity, moving with speed and care toward a safer ridge. Exhaustion, injury, and fear still weighed heavily, but relief began to bloom. The impossible had been achieved, at least for now. Lives had been saved by courage, skill, and unwavering determination. Landing back at the base, the pilot shut down the aircraft and sat in silence for a moment. His body was tense, mind alert, yet a small sense of relief washed over him. He had done what he could. Others would continue the work from here, but he had made the difference that mattered most. He had given hope when all seemed lost. Inside the mountains, the team finally gathered at a safer point. Injuries were tended to, breaths were caught, and words of encouragement were shared. They did not speak of fear or despair, only of survival, strategy, and the unseen hand that had guided them. They were grateful, humbled, and aware that luck alone had not saved them. Skill, courage, and sacrifice had been the true heroes of the night. The night lingered, but the worst had passed. The team rested where they could, alert but calm, knowing extraction would come soon. Every man felt the weight of what had happened, yet also the pull of resilience and human endurance. They had survived against odds that seemed insurmountable, and they carried the knowledge that one quiet, unnoticed man had changed the course of their night. The janitor stepped away from the cockpit finally, removing his helmet and running a hand over his face. Sweat, dirt, and exhaustion mixed together. He thought briefly of his child, imagining their relief, and allowed himself a small, private smile. This was not about recognition. This was about life, responsibility, and the power of action when it was needed most. The mountains remained silent under the stars, but lives had been saved. Hope had returned. Courage had made the difference. And somewhere, in a quiet base where most would never notice, a single father had flown into danger to give others a chance at life. His story was far from over, but this night he had written a chapter that would not be forgotten by those who lived it. The mountains seemed endless, dark shadows stretching over every ridge and crevice. For the team trapped below, the night was a slow crawl of fear and exhaustion. Their movements were careful, calculated, and deliberate. Every sound made them jump. Every shadow seemed alive with danger. They were tired, wounded, and unsure if they could keep moving much longer. Then it came the roar. At first, it was faint, almost impossible to distinguish from the wind. But it grew, steady and powerful, cutting through the night like a living thing. The men froze, listening, their ears strained to confirm what they were hearing. And then they saw it, slicing across the ridge line, engines screaming with life and power. The aircraft came, not with hesitation, but with purpose. Disbelief hit first. Some of the men blinked, unsure if they were imagining it. The darkness of the night made it hard to see clearly, but the shape, the sound, and the precision could not be denied. Help had arrived. Hope returned with the force they had almost forgotten. Their muscles tensed, adrenaline surging, eyes wide with relief and determination. The pilot, far above, guided the aircraft with calm precision. Every pass was calculated to maximize cover and minimize exposure. His eyes scanned the terrain, anticipating enemy positions and adjusting for wind and angle. The roar of the engines became a rhythm for the team below, a signal that they were not alone. The sky itself had become a shield. The enemy fired from concealed positions, but each attempt was met with exact suppression. The pilot's knowledge of the aircraft's capabilities allowed him to strike without endangering the team. Bursts of fire and machine power lit the night, showing the enemy that their advantage had disappeared. The mountains echoed with controlled chaos, a sound of hope carving a path through danger. The team moved quickly, carrying wounded men when necessary, crawling over rocks and ridges, taking advantage of every window the pilot created. Injuries, exhaustion, and fear pressed on them, but determination held. They trusted each other completely, synchronizing their moves with instinct and training. Every gesture, every step, every breath mattered. One man slipped on loose rock, pain shooting through his leg, but the leader and medic were there instantly. They lifted him carefully, shifting weight, guiding him along a safer path. The pilot noticed the movement from above, adjusting his passes to ensure cover remained, timing fire to suppress enemy positions precisely when the team needed it most. It was a silent conversation of survival between sky and ground. Time seemed to stretch. The team's movement was slow, methodical, and constant. Every second felt like a lifetime. The night pressed down, clouds thickening and winds intensifying. Yet the aircraft never faltered. The pilot's focus was absolute. Each maneuver, each burst of fire was executed with skill honed over years. Experience met necessity, and necessity drove life-saving precision. The team reached a narrow ridge that offered a slight advantage. It was not much, but in the mountains, small advantages were everything. They paused briefly, catching breath, tending wounds, whispering encouragement to each other. Fear was still present, but hope had returned fully now. They moved as one unit, trusting in the rhythm set by the pilot above. The pilot made pass after pass, adjusting for enemy movement, weather, and terrain. Each run was precise, calculated, and relentless. The roar of engines and the flash of suppression fire became their lifeline. The team moved with it, understanding instinctively when to rush, when to crawl, and when to stay low. Survival was a choreography of courage and skill. At one point, the pilot had to maneuver sharply to avoid a sudden wind gust. The aircraft groaned, shifting with the motion, but he maintained control. His focus did not waver, his determination unbroken. The team below felt the impact indirectly through the timing of cover and fire. Their movements adjusted instinctively. A silent partnership formed through shared stakes and unspoken trust. The injured man struggled again, muscles straining, pain sharp. The medic pressed a hand to his shoulder, whispering calm instructions, while the team leader guided them across a safer path. Every step was measured, every movement synchronized with the pilot's actions. They were alive because of the skill and courage above. And their own resilience below. The enemy tried to regroup, shifting positions and firing bursts of machine fire, but the pilot anticipated every move. His aerial dominance disrupted their plans, forcing them into defensive positions, giving the team the precious seconds they needed to move. Strategy and instinct danced in the night air, each pass a calculated act of salvation. Hours passed like minutes. The team reached a plateau that offered the best possible cover. Here, they could rest briefly, tend wounds, and prepare for the next stage. Every man was exhausted, every breath heavy with pain and relief. Yet the bond among them had deepened. They were alive because of each other, because of training, because of the courage of someone they had never seen, but knew and risked everything to save them. The pilot's final pass came, precise and deliberate. Suppression fire cleared the remaining enemy positions, giving the team a secure path to a rendezvous point. They moved quickly, taking advantage of the moment. Injured men were lifted carefully, steps measured and coordinated, every motion a testament to human determination and trust. The roar of the aircraft faded slowly as the team reached the extraction point. Relief washed over them, a weight lifted from shoulders, muscles relaxing slightly after the tension of hours in extreme danger. The pilot had done more than provide cover. He had restored hope, given them the chance to survive against overwhelming odds. Landing back at the base, the pilot shut down the engines. Breathing deeply, muscles tense from exertion. Sweat and exhaustion mixed with relief. He had succeeded, but his thoughts immediately returned to the team, to the men still recovering, and to the fragile thread of hope that had carried them through the night. At the mountain plateau, the team gathered, tending wounds, sharing quiet words of gratitude and disbelief. They knew that luck alone had not saved them. Skill, courage, and selfless action had made the difference. They whispered about the man in the sky, about the precise and fearless support that had brought them through. Respect, gratitude, and awe filled the air, unspoken but deeply felt. The night lingered, quiet now, tension slowly easing. Clouds drifted away, revealing stars, and a calm returned to the mountains. The team rested where they could, alert but composed. Every man carried the weight of the night, aware that survival had depended on courage, skill, and faith. The pilot returned to his quiet corner of the base. He removed his helmet, ran a hand over his face, and allowed himself a brief moment of relief. He thought of his child, imagining the relief and safety waiting at home. This act had been about responsibility, not recognition. Lives had been saved because someone chose to act, to take risks, to trust skill and instinct over protocol and hesitation. Above the mountains, the sky settled into a calm after the storm. The team on the ground had survived. The man in the aircraft had made the impossible possible. Hope had returned to a place where despair had nearly taken hold. Courage, determination, and human skill had shaped the outcome, proving that even when all seems lost, action can restore life, trust, and possibility. The night would eventually give way to dawn. Extraction would come, stories would be told, and gratitude would flow silently among those who survived. The pilot had returned to the shadows, unnoticed by most, yet his impact was immeasurable. Human lives had been spared because one man had stepped forward, chosen responsibility, and executed skill with courage. The mountains remained, silent and indifferent, but the memory of the night would stay with those who lived it. Each heartbeat, each breath, carried the knowledge that survival was achieved not by chance, but by courage, by selflessness, and by the quiet power of a single person willing to make a difference when it was needed most. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the mountains, painting the ridges with soft orange and gold. The night had been long, grueling, and full of danger, but the team was alive. Their bodies were battered, muscles stiff, and eyes heavy from exhaustion. Yet there was a quiet relief in their movements. The extraction team was on its way, and the men finally allowed themselves to breathe. They had survived against odds that should have been insurmountable. The pilot sat in a quiet corner of the base, far from the commotion. He removed his helmet, rubbed his temples, and let the silence wash over him. The roar of the aircraft, the tension of the night, and the fear of what could have happened all lingered in his mind. He had acted without expectation of recognition, without thought of medals or fame. His duty had been simple: bring them home. And he had done it. Most people at the base would never know. They would hear only the official reports, written carefully to avoid revealing operational details. The janitor would not appear on the news, would not be celebrated at ceremonies, and would not be named in briefings. Yet he knew the truth. He had made the difference. Lives were saved because he chose to act when rules and protocols suggested caution. He had flown into danger for strangers, driven by skill, responsibility, and a deep sense of humanity. Back in the mountains, the team gathered at the extraction point. They were quiet, each man absorbed in his own thoughts. Relief mingled with disbelief, and gratitude was unspoken but palpable. They looked at each other and silently acknowledged the truth. Someone above had watched over them, guiding every move, providing cover, and giving them a chance to survive. That unseen hand had restored hope when it had nearly vanished. The medic checked the injured once more, ensuring that wounds were tended to, and that everyone could move safely. The team leader scanned the horizon, taking in the mountains that had tested them so severely, and allowed himself a moment to reflect. They had survived the night, not just through training and resilience, but through the courage of someone who had flown into darkness and risked everything to save them. The aircraft that had saved them landed again at the base, engines slowing, the roar fading into the morning calm. The pilot exited quietly, walking away from the cockpit with steady, deliberate steps. Sweat and dust clung to him, a silent testament to the night's effort. He did not seek applause or recognition. His reward was in knowing that the team had made it, that lives had been spared because of his actions. The janitor returned to his routine, moving through hallways that had been quiet and dim only hours before. He carried on as if nothing had happened, cleaning floors, emptying trash bins, and performing tasks that seemed mundane. Yet in every movement there was a calm assurance, a quiet pride. The night had demanded everything from him, and he had delivered. Still, he remained invisible to most, a silent hero whose story would live on only in the memories of those he saved. The team was loaded onto transport, vehicles for extraction. Injured men leaned against each other for support. Fatigue weighed heavily on every body, but the spirit was intact. Every man carried the memory of the pilot's intervention, the roar of the aircraft above, and the precise, fearless support that had changed the course of their lives. Words were few, but understanding was deep. They would never forget the night, the mountains, and the quiet man who had given them another chance. The journey back to base was slow, careful, and quiet. Conversation was minimal, each man lost in reflection. Fear had been present, but it had been conquered. Exhaustion lingered, but it was tempered by relief and gratitude. Their lives were saved, and that knowledge burned steadily in their hearts. They knew they owed a debt, not to chance or luck, but to skill, courage, and selfless action at the base. The pilot returned to the corner of the hangar where he had prepared for the mission. He sat quietly, taking a moment to breathe. He thought of his child at home, waiting without knowledge of the danger and heroism that had unfolded. The thought brought a small smile to his face. He had risked his life for strangers, but his responsibility to his own family remained the foundation of every choice he made. The officers at the base filed reports, spoke in careful terms, and tried to convey the mission's success without revealing too much. They spoke of precision, coordination, and courage, but the janitor's role remained unmentioned. That was how it was meant to be. Rules, protocol, and chain of command often dictated recognition. Yet for him, recognition had never been the goal. The lives saved were the only acknowledgment needed. In the mountains, the team rested, recovering from the night's ordeal. Each man carried his own injuries and memories, but also a renewed understanding of courage and human skill. They had faced what should have been impossible and survived. They had witnessed bravery that went beyond the call of duty, humility and heroism, and the power of one person to change the outcome of many lives. The sun rose fully, spilling light over the rugged landscape. The shadows of the night receded, revealing the harsh but beautiful terrain that had tested them so thoroughly. They had endured, survived, and would carry this story within them forever. Yet the man who had made the difference remained far away, quietly stepping back into his routine, unrecognized by the world, yet fully aware of the lives he had saved. The day at the base moved on. Routine tasks resumed. The world outside remained unaware of the night's heroism. The janitor moved among hallways and rooms, unnoticed, but with a quiet sense of purpose and fulfillment. He had flown into danger, confronted fear, and acted with skill and precision. Lives had been spared, and that knowledge was enough. Even the team on the mountains would eventually return to their daily lives. They would tell parts of the story, but much would remain unsaid, known only to them and the quiet pilot who had changed the outcome. They would remember the fear, the exhaustion, and the hope that returned just in time. They would remember the precision, the courage, and the selfless action that made their survival possible. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the base, a single father walked the halls, pushing a simple cart, performing ordinary tasks. No one celebrated him, no one applauded. Yet he knew the truth. The truth was in the lives he had saved, the men who would continue because of his courage, and the knowledge that even when hope seemed lost, action and skill could restore it. He returned to his child at home, exhausted but fulfilled, the quiet hero whose bravery would live on in memory, even if it remained unseen by the world.